Jim Sullivan was born in Nebraska in 1939, but grew up in San Diego, California, and got interested in music after listening to local blues groups. Would later play guitar in a local rock band called the Survivors. He later married and opened a bar with a friend, but unfortunately the business failed. And in 1968 he moved with his wife Barbara and young son Chris to Los Angeles. He went on to write music and record singles, but they were not very successful. He later played at well-known venues and eventually gained regular work at the Raft Club in Malibu and became friends with popular actors of the day, Lee Majors, Lee Marvin and Harry Dean Stanton. Sullivan was a country blues troubadour who had been compared to Nick Drake, Richie Havens and Graham Parsons. Jim Sullivan also appeared as an extra in the 60s classic road movie Easy Rider, where he was close friends with Dennis Hopper. In 1969, he released his first album titled UFO, which was not particularly successful, and then in 1972 released his second album titled Jim Sullivan, but that too was unsuccessful. At this stage of his life, his alcohol consumption increased due to his frustration with his lack of musical success, and his marriage was now on the rocks, while at the same time his wife was having their second child, which turned out to be a daughter, which they named Jamie. Not to be deterred, he continued to pursue a musical career, and in 1975 headed to Nashville to hopefully find success there. On March the 4th, 1975, Jim Sullivan left Los Angeles in his Volkswagen Beetle, and on his second day on the road was cautioned by Highway Patrol for his erratic driving, where they gave him a breath test that proved negative. He later checked into the La Mesa Motel in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, but things got very strange when on March the 5th his wife Barbara got a call from Jim, telling her he was all right. She had no reason to think otherwise because he'd only left the day before. Then the conversation got weirder when she asked him for more details, and he replied with, "You wouldn't believe it if I told you." And his wife said, "Jim, what's the matter? Is anything wrong?" And he said, "Forget it. Just forget I said anything. I'll call you from Nashville." He then left his keys in the room and headed to town to buy vodka at a local store. After a few days when his wife had not heard from him, his family began calling hospitals and the police. They learned that 15 hours on the road, Sullivan had been pulled over on suspicion of driving under the influence, but had passed the sobriety test. He then checked into the motel in Santa Rosa, where police told his wife that the bed had never been slept in. The following day, he was spotted 26 miles away at a ranch that was owned by the Giannetti family. His car was later found abandoned at the ranch, and eyewitnesses claimed they saw him walking away from his car. When the car was later inspected, they found all his belongings, including his money, guitar, clothes, documents, along with a box of his unsold records. That was the last time anyone saw Jim Sullivan, where search parties failed to find any trace of him. On March the 8th, Sullivan's car was towed away, where it had been parked in rough terrain with his 12-string guitar in the front seat along with his other belongings. This was a sign that something was very, very wrong. When Sullivan's friend Dobbs heard that he had left his precious guitar behind, he knew he wasn't coming back, stating that no matter what, Jim would never have left his guitar. Dobbs believed he stumbled into something or someone that was unforgiving and said it's kind of poetic to picture him still walking out there somewhere, but something happened. There were many rumours about his disappearance that included murder or becoming disoriented and lost. A body was later found in a remote area a few miles away from where he was last seen, but an autopsy later revealed that it was not Jim Sullivan. According to his son Chris, his father was charismatic, gregarious, with a magnetic personality, and maybe he'd attracted some nasty people. He had a shiny energy that attracted people, and they had parties where there were people always in and out of the Sullivan house partying. His son often theorised about his father's disappearance over the course of his life, and believed he may have got on the wrong side of someone and was probably slain and buried somewhere. The time that he was stopped by the police in his Volkswagen Beetle and maybe rubbed them up the wrong way, which they didn't take too kindly to. Or maybe he just took a very long walk because the disillusionment of failing in the music industry that he loved so much finally got to him and he just walked into the desert. Yet a person cannot completely disappear in the desert, where in sand or neutral soil, a skeleton can remain intact for hundreds of years, so surely his remains would have been found, leading to the fact that he must have been buried, as the desert is a huge expanse to bury a body. At the time of Sullivan's disappearance, newspaper reporter David Delgado worked for the Communicator and insisted that the investigation was thorough. There was no stone unturned, yet no trace of him was found. But another local by the name of Donald Cena disagreed and thought there was something strange about how the investigation went down and why they didn't investigate it more. Donald Cena claims that his father, Pete, worked on a ranch close to where Sullivan's car was discovered abandoned and was possibly the last person to have spoken with Sullivan, where he asked him if he needed a ride. He described him as having a handlebar moustache, just like a cattle hand he knew. As often happens in cases where a person disappears in mysterious circumstances, many questions are asked as to what actually happened to them, from the rational to the completely irrational, where various theories began to spread, which included his body being disposed of by the mafia or the police, and an even crazy idea that he was abducted by extraterrestrials. Both Jim and his wife shared a belief in alien life, which Jim Sullivan actually wrote and sang about, where his first album was called UFO. They both believed that there was intelligent life out there, even to the point that Barbara Sullivan believed her husband's disappearance could have something to do with alien abduction. Because of their interest in UFOs, Barbara Sullivan took comfort in the idea that her husband was abducted by aliens. She said it was easier to believe that theory rather than any grisly alternative. Their son Chris said that his parents believed in reincarnation and astrology, where his mother was convinced the husband was up in the stars somewhere waiting for her. His vanishing still plagues his family, along with a small group of loyal enthusiasts, when he mysteriously disappeared in a small town in New Mexico. Sadly, Sullivan's daughter Jamie died in 1988 when she was only a teenager, and his wife Barbara died in 2016, and the last remaining member of the family, Chris, now in his early 60s, is a professor at San Diego's Mesa College.